Hello everyone, I have a little bit of a problem on my hands. I am in desperate need of a vacation. We're in the middle of the summer months, you know? The perfect time to go lounging on a tropical island in the middle of the Pacific and die of a heat stroke. And I especially need that last part. Well listen, people don't go on vacation to relax. They go on vacation to escape the dreadful monotony of daily life. Welcome to Tuvalu. The islands of the Pacific Ocean have a bunch of different nations, those being Palau, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, Nauru, Kiribati, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. You can imagine that being surrounded by the largest ocean on the planet can have some negative consequences on both your population and economy, so all of them mostly rely on subsistence agriculture. But then where does the government get their money? The export markets differ between the islands. Kiribati and the Solomon Islands have it the worst, being two of the least developed countries in the world, relying on development aid from others. While they did have phosphate mines and timber respectively, their overexploitation has led to a dead end. Tonga and Samoa have it slightly better, having a larger agricultural export sector, but mostly getting a lot of money from remittances, aka money from Tongans or Samoans who live abroad. Fiji has one of the larger islands in the region, and so they've got more resources than the rest, most notably from forests. Besides that, they also get more tourists than the others, and of course, Fiji water. Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands are lucky. They're all in the Compact of Free Association, or the COFA, which is an agreement that says that the US can build military bases on the islands and they get a lot of smackaroos in return. Then that leaves us with Nauru, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. Nauru, the second lowest GDP. Tuvalu, the first lowest GDP. And Vanuatu is Vanuatu. So with these countries having reached rock bottom, what do they do to get paid? Well, what do you think humans do when they're in that situation? So what is diplomatic prostitution? There are a lot of forms you can take, but here's the most notable example. The United Nations often holds meetings where each member state gets asked a question on a certain topic, which is called a UN resolution. They're non-binding but are good indicators of the general will of the world. One of the more recent famous ones being Resolution ES-11/1, the one that demanded Russia to withdraw from Ukraine, which only had 5 member states going against. And this result is actually quite normal because most resolutions are incredibly one-sided. Either the overwhelming majority votes no, yes, or abstains, with not a lot of in-betweens. So let's say you were an abstaining nation in that resolution with 141 yeses and 5 noes. If you were to vote yes, you'd be about 0.7% of that group, which isn't a lot. But if you were to vote no, you'd be about 16.6% of that group, which is a lot more. Getting just one more vote on the minority side is a lot more valuable than getting just one more vote on the majority side. So if one country is in a minority and really needs more support, perhaps they can bribe someone? That's where Nauru, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu come in. To escape their economic struggles, they'll sell their vote in exchange for other services, often money, and that's why they're called diplomatic prostitutes. Maybe a bit of a vulgar term, but you can also call it palm tea diplomacy or checkbook diplomacy. The latter name is most often used in the diplomatic fight between the People's Republic and Republic of China, to see who can get the most recognition. The PRC of course has the most economic leverage, but for some of the Pacifics who don't rely on China as much, Taiwan can buy them over, which is why Nauru, Palau, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands recognize the ROC as a sovereign country. Let's look at some other examples. Tuvalu and Vanuatu don't dabble into the UN resolution business as much as Nauru, but mostly because they use other sources. For Tuvalu, this is their .tv internet domain name, which means that television companies or streaming services pay royalties to put .tv at the end of their websites. As for Vanuatu, it's selling passports, which is pretty valuable considering that their passports allow visa-free travel through the EU, something that Chinese businesses might be interested in. Even the US-supported Marshall Islands have a trick up their sleeve, selling licenses for using their flag on ships due to their shipping laws being a lot more relaxed. This is called a flag of convenience, and the Marshalls are the third most popular behind Liberia and Panama. But going back to Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and Nauru, one of the more interesting cases in which they've been involved in is that of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, two regions that are internationally recognized as part of Georgia, but are trying to become recognized as full countries. Both of them received international attention after a war broke out between Russia and Georgia over the sovereignty of the regions. International attention turned to international side-eyes, so Russia decided to hire some diplomatic prostitutes, our 3 main characters, so that Abkhazia and South Ossetia could get some more recognition at the UN. But it didn't last that long. First, Tuvalu stopped recognizing them 3 years after the resolution. Vanuatu had to take some time to think though, swapping recognition 5 times before finally settling on Georgia, even after they received their Russian money or freshwater. A big bummer for the brown bear. Their neighbor Nauru, however, is going all the way. Yes, Nauru still recognizes Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and Georgia of course hasn't missed the opportunity to make fun of them for it. Unfortunately, the world doesn't care about disrespect against diplomatic prostitutes. They just have to deal with it to secure their bag. Thankfully, they don't have consulates or embassies on each other's territories yet, because then those places would be in the running for the least important places that have ever existed, right behind Brussels. And while the US claims that this completely infringes on Georgia's sovereign borders, Russia shoots back with a "no you" argument regarding Iraq and Kosovo. And that debate will go on for a couple more decades, so let's give him a minute. But that doesn't mean that Russia is the only hirer of diplomatic prostitutes. The US does it as well. In two resolutions regarding whether or not the capital of Israel being Jerusalem should be declared as null and void, and whether or not Palestine should become a UN observer state, the no voters include some Pacific islands. Micronesia, Palau, and the Marshalls are to be expected. They're part of the COFA after all. But looking if there are any others on the list, who else but Nauru? Nauru simply plays both sides so that they always come out on top. The conflict over Abkhazia and South Ossetia has even made the EU dip their toes into the business of diplomatic prostitution. While Russia kept demanding Belarus to recognize those two, the EU simply dangled the carrot on a stick known as the Eastern Partnership over their heads. This made Russia start a war. The Milk War. It's literally just a ban on Belarusian dairy that lasted a week. How dramatic. But now that Belarus has been voluntarily kicked out of the Eastern Partnership by the EU due to their compliance in the invasion of Ukraine, perhaps Belarus will recognize the mountaineers quite soon. I said perhaps. So is diplomatic prostitution the future? Well, it depends. Either more countries become poorer and isolated and must rely on it, or climate change will completely sink the Pacific Islands starting with Tuvalu, making this story just a relic of the past. Only time will tell. Wait, but isn't this Tuvalu?